You wrote, and this is probably a good point to get to some of the things you've written in The Populist Delusion. You wrote, I think, in page 1, that all social change at all times and in all places have been top-down and driven by elites rather than the people. And those movements which have the appearance of being organic and bottom-up protests, for example, the 1960 civil rights movement in the USA or Russian revolutions of 1917, were in fact tightly organized and funded by elites. And so I guess what I've got to ask you here, Neema, is I've heard Vivek Ramaswamy say the guys with the gold make the rules. That was in his Woke Inc. book. We now have seen a big vibe shift, a counter-elite come into power in the US with Trump, Musk, Vance, RFK. If ideology follows power, if we've got the unipolar world coming back for at least a fleeting moment where they're saying, you guys have really screwed things up and things are bad, this is the way you fix it. Do you think that the problems we've just been highlighting here, where people just don't see the problems and aren't willing to do anything about them because they don't want to see them, do you think that that changes? Are we downstream of that, or is it not as simple as that?
No, I mean, I'm a little bit less optimistic about quote unquote vibe shift than a lot of people are, because if you just take a step back and have a look at, well, what are the forces at play here? What are the interests of power? I have maintained that the woke, whatever woke was a failed ideology, right? It fundamentally is bad from the point of view of being a political technology that works in the interests of power, right? Why is it bad? I mean, a ruling ideology should bring people together. It should get people to buy into the systems. It should, and woke didn't. It divided people, turned people against the system. It, made enemies of people who should have been part of the system. Managerial class or intellectuals who were fired for petty political reasons, for example. Who then are motivated to work against quote unquote woke. So it was clear that this was a problem that the system needed to correct. So it's not that surprising to me that you've got people like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, and various other the so-called tech bros who, let's not forget, they were there in the 90s, they were there in the 2000s. The DEI stuff and the woke stuff was actually becoming an operational problem. It was also becoming a problem for military recruitment, which, I mean, of course, you can't have an imperium, you can't have an empire where the army is being hollowed out and weakened by a pernicious and toxic ideology. So at least 2 years ago, I wrote an article called Putting the Woke Away, where I said, look, one way or the other, the system is going to pull back on this stuff, because the bottom line is military recruitment is half of where it should be. And you can't have a system where almost a third of the population are checked out. Okay. Now, if you look at from the point of view of power, by power, I just mean the American system as a whole. If you go back 3 years and think about how many people had doubts about the 2020 election, about democracy as a whole, about any of their institutions, about Hollywood, about you name it, they had checked out. They were against it. They didn't like it. All it's really taken is Trump winning or being allowed to win. Some might want to put it that way. And a couple of weeks of executive orders, and now we're so back. Now everybody's back in. Now everybody's looking forward to the movies coming out again, and America's back, baby, and all this. And it's as simple as, I mean, you don't really need a deep understanding of elite theory to see that actually the system is kind of self-corrected, and Trump was. I mean, what I said was, if they do this, Trump will probably buy the American system plus 30 to 50 years, something like that. And I genuinely believe Trump comes as the savior to the system, not as the overthrow of the system. Okay. Now, it may look revolutionary because the system has a lot of rot in it. Right. I mean, I do believe that various uh, arms of the organism had either become rotten or gone rogue. You know, the Democrat Party in America, I think, it had got to levels of corruption that are intolerable for any system. Okay, so one way or the other, it needed to self-correct. Um, but now that it's doing so, I think a lot of people who 3 years ago would have quite happily said that they don't really believe in democracy or whatnot are probably back on the reservation. So in a sense, while it's from the point of view of stability and order, it's good that Trump has won. But from the overall point of view of if you want this structure to fall, Trump has done the opposite. He saved it, at least for the time being. There's I do think the U.S. empire is in its late phase. In fact, I put out a video very recently that people can go and check out, talking about how tariffs are a sign of an empire on the downward swing. If you look at the British Empire in the 1930s, they also started putting up tariffs. The 1930s were actually the height of the British Empire in terms of total area controlled. But yeah, in the space of 20, 30 years, British Empire was gone. Right? I mean, by the death of Churchill, it was gone in 1965. So it can happen that quickly, but nobody in 1930, say, would have believed you if you'd said, "Oh, well, in 30 years' time, all of this will be gone." But the fact they've moved from laissez-faire or free trade as a doctrine to tariffs and trade wars is something that happens in the late empire, uh, mainly because free trade is best understood as a control mechanism for power. It's a kind of soft control mechanism, which America has done or had done pretty well from World War II up until now. That structure's falling apart, and if Trump represents anything, it is the end of that period of American kind of real dominance in the world.